Brothers and sisters, we are going to begin now the recordings for workshop 2 of the 2022 course of the Bereavement Ministry program. Today's topic, communication skills for ministry. And again, I thank you, Sister Sherry Maher, for being with us as the instructor for this course. We welcome all of you, those who are from our parish communities of the Diocese of San Bernardino, and those who join us from other dioceses. Welcome, and be ready to learn a lot of things to put into practice. A lot of brothers and sisters that are suffering are waiting for our ministry, our service, our dedication. So I welcome Sister Terry to start the teachings of today's workshop. Good morning, Sister Terry.
Good morning, Jose Luis.
Welcome, Sister. And I, brothers and sisters, as I am also monitoring the course in Spanish, I will be in and out. Thank you. Go ahead, right, please, Sister.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning, Sister.
I hope you all had a good week. Before we get into today, though, you've had a whole week to think about what was presented last week. Are there any questions? Anything you want to comment on? Anything that could be helpful to you? Now's the time to fess up, people. You all had, I don't know when Jose sent out the handouts. How many have already looked at them? Raise your hands, or put the little, see, you're cheating already.
It was about.
So we can all close down and go home since you all all looked at the handouts already.
Sister, what happens too is a lot of other classes, they'll send it ahead of time so we can read up on it. Guess we weren't told not to read on it.
No, I'm just teasing you. It's Saturday. Come on, people, it's early. I find humor in many things, so I'm messing with you, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. I do hope, though, that since you looked at them, you put them in order. So if you notice on the bottom right hand of the page, it's like 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. That's the order they come in. So the first 2 is the second workshop. The second number is the page. So second workshop, page 1. Second workshop, page 2. Okay. So if you want to do that while we kind of sort of get started.
I don't know.
Today we're going to talk about how well we listen. And for most of us, we would think, I know how to do that. I've been using my ears since I was born. And I hope today you learned that you've not been using them well. Okay. And that's not a judgment. That's just the reality of life. Okay. So let's talk, shall we? Really? I mean, what's going on? So if you remember, for those of us who are my age, maybe, I saw this quote yesterday. So we learned that the biggest communication problem is that we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply. So usually as people are talking to us, we're already trying to figure out the answer. We're already trying to figure out what we need to say. Okay. So if you remember, so the reality is that in communicating, 55% of communication is nonverbal. And that means the stuff that's not said. 38% is vocal. It goes in with how, the tone of their voice, their inflection, certain accents on words, or whatever it may be. Only 7% is words only. So if you think about it, body language is over 50% of how we communicate as human beings. How many of you are surprised by that? You already knew it? Okay. So when we learn to listen to people, we're taking in their whole being. Okay, it's not only what is not being said, it's what their body language is saying to us, and then what their words are saying to us. So for those of you who are old enough, I don't know if kids still play this game, but do you remember the game Operator? You know, when you would line up in a row and one person would start some kind of a phrase, and then you'd whisper it, and you'd whisper it, and you'd whisper it. And
Yeah, I remember.
to the point that when it got to the end, it had nothing to do with what was said at the beginning. Okay, that's just an example of how we listen. We're not good at it. Okay, and again, it's not a judgment. It's just who we are and how we've grown up. Okay, so when we look at effective communication skills, what we want to learn to be or utilize these skills is active listening, to address the nonverbal communication, learning how to ask the questions, how to be clear and succinct, to clarify, how to be an empathic listener. That's not an easy one. To provide feedback, develop the trust and the rapport, and how to be present. Okay, so it all sounds good, but the barriers to communication, and if you listen to yourself, is that we judge.
Yeah, well, we just.
Okay, we criticize, we get into name calling, and we don't even have to say it out loud, but we do it. We don't pay attention. How many people might be listening and texting, or listening and daydreaming, looking out the window? We use technical language, or we want to offer solutions. We want to fix the problem. And then we avoid having concern for others. So you might listen one way with your family and a totally different way with a friend. And again, depending on how close that relationship is as a friend, it depends on how you listen. Or if you're in parish, or you see someone who on the streets who might be disheveled, obviously homeless, you're going to listen to that person a whole lot differently than you would a nicely dressed person coming down the street, right?
Right.
Okay, so when you look at the barriers, again, all of us at some point fall into all 5 of those things. So 2 types of communication, as we've noticed, is verbal. So the verbal is in the words, the tone of voice, the volume, and perhaps the speed by which they speak. So they can speak slow. And then, okay, how patient am I if this person is speaking really slow? Or how they just speak fast. I've got nieces, and I don't know what happened in the gene pool, but in that family, everybody speaks really, 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 really fast. And then it seems like they slur their words, or they all come together. And I just have to say, can you say it again? Because I'm old, I got old ears, and they're just not making it. Okay. And then the nonverbal. So we look at body language, we look at the posture, their use of space and use of objects. So again, the verbal is only 7%. What happens non-verbally is 93%. And we want to be aware of that. Okay, so as adults, we teach our children to talk. We can't wait for them to talk, right? It's a big moment, big moment. They said their first word today. We don't teach them how to listen. Okay, we're taught to look for answers. It's kind of like, if you remember growing up, it was like an embarrassment to say, I don't know. And if you had to say, I don't know, you made it up, right? You tried to come up with an answer. We tell people to make their needs known, but we don't listen. We don't teach people to listen because we don't know how. So we do a lot of talking. So good listening is empathic. It is active. It's a way of making contact with people. It allows us to focus our attention. Listening is work. Okay, so here's a video of not such a good listener, okay?
But you ain't said nothing.
No volume.
Sister, you have to still share the sound.
Share the sound.
Oh, you don't really need to.
Share the sound
Yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
I
on
don't know how to
on
do
your
that.
share, in your share screen box. There should be something that shares sound. Or computer audio.
Let me see.
Sister, this is like the one last week.
I know, but that was last week already. A lot of life happened.
Yeah, go back to the beginning and then just click on it. Like you're opening a normal thing. Just
Like
go
this.
back to the screen. Go back to the screen before that. Close that out. Go back. Keep going.
It won't let me go back.
I won't let you go back. Okay.
Poor communication.
I could play it. I don't know if you'll hear it.
It won't.
You hear that?
Oh, here we go. Okay.
So I read your chart and I know we talked about that. Are you still feeling depressed? Yeah.
Oh, it's playing. Wait a minute.
We got it?
Well, let me go back at one point.
So this depression, why are you? Oh wait, sorry, I have another note. Something else I wanted to ask you before. No.
Come on.
Here, I'll run it for you, sister.
Okay. This is the wrong slide. It's moving forward and I don't want it to.
You were there the other day, but I just wanted to touch base today.
Okay.
You know, about situation. So I read your chart and I know we talked about that. Are you still feeling depressed?
Okay, that's the slide.
The depression.
Want me to start it over?
And I know you're feeling depressed now, but I felt depressed before, and it will pass. Like you'll get over it. It's not that big a deal. And
You got it?
Got it.
hi, I'm here now. I talked with you, I know the other day, but I just wanted to touch base today, you know, about your stuff, your situation. So I read your chart and I know we talked about that. Are you still feeling depressed? Yeah, the depression's. And I know you're feeling depressed now, but I felt depressed before, and it will pass. Like you'll get over it. It's not that big a deal. And so this depression, why are you here? Oh wait, sorry, I have another note. Something else I wanted to ask you before. No, why, or is that depression what brought you in here? Well, I OD'd earlier because I was depressed. Yeah. Okay, so that overdose we can talk about. So then why are you feeling depressed? Well, I was abused and just I mean, your life doesn't, I looked in your chart, your life doesn't sound that bad. So this depression, I think you can get over it. Yeah. Let me look at my notes here.
Not paying attention.
Oh, hey. Yeah. Can I talk to you later? I'm gonna finish talking now. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Notes here. So can we talk about these? Oh, that like that area. Do you want to? Are you still having those thoughts? No. No. Okay, then. Great. No, that's because I know. I mean, if you're having them. It's kind of like I don't understand why people don't like killing themselves. It's really very weak of them to do, personally. But anyways, oh, hold on a second. Hello? No, I'm at work right now. Yeah, you know Belmont. Yeah, I'm gonna talk with this patient here. Yeah, and I'll call you back. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyways, so let me look at my notes. But so you, those thoughts were saying, what were you saying about those? Did you have them? I forget. Well, no. Okay. Okay, that's great. I'm glad. So are you feeling better then? I guess so. Yeah. So what do you think has worked in your therapy? I like talking to the therapist. One-on-one? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, do you want me to see if your doctor's available? I can totally arrange that. Okay, I'm gonna go check that then right now. Okay.
Okay. What did you notice in that?
Everything.
Like what?
She's in a hurry. She doesn't have time. She's not attentive.
Okay.
She was doing most of the talking rather than listening to what the patient might want.
That's true.
She was very distracted as well.
Her body language was really awful. It was like it was all about her, and that kind of shut the other person down.
And she wasn't watching the body language of the patient
Not
at
at
all.
What was the body language of the patient telling you?
Well, I guess, I guess whatever you say, you're the expert. I don't know. I wish I could talk a little bit more, but you're not letting me.
Okay.
She had anxiety. She's frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
At Holy Innocents, we couldn't hear it very well at all.
Okay, sorry about that.
She overwhelmed her patient. She constantly placed her patient in a defense mode because the patient didn't have a chance to have her feelings brought to the surface. So she basically forced her to deny her feelings and withdraw.
She seemed like she was. I don't think the interviewer made eye contact with the patient, or she would have noticed how disturbed she already was with her eye movements and the way she sat back and forward. And so this interviewer didn't make eye contact really with her.
Okay.
Well, she didn't, and the interviewer didn't give her any confidence. So of course, I don't think that patient is coming back to her, and she's going to continue with her problems, and something may go wrong in her life. And also, it's all because that person couldn't listen.
Also too, the interviewer didn't repeat what the client was saying to make sure that she heard what she was saying.
Okay.
She just seemed very distracted and disconnected from the patient, and the patient could pick up on that. It seemed like the patient looked like she was thinking, gee, it seems like she's more interested in the checklist and getting certain information than really exploring what's going on with me.
Okay.
And she also took a phone call. She didn't have to take that phone call. She should have muted her phone to just dedicate her time with the patient too.
What other distraction was there?
She didn't make the patient a priority.
Okay.
It looked like someone else had walked into the room because she was waving at someone else. So there was no privacy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It seemed like they were in a table in a room with other people. It wasn't like a one-to-one. It really wasn't a one-on-one because there was other people around.
When the patient or when the nurse said something to the patient about depression, what did the nurse do?
She threw her hands.
She marginalized it.
She what?
She marginalized it.
How so?
The way she spoke to her, the way she acted, what she was doing with her checklist. She wouldn't let the patient answer one question.
She did something else, though.
Another one.
Yeah, she did something else, though.
She said she didn't understand it either. The question.
Did something else.
Wasn't her hand gesture, she just waved it off?
Yeah.
No, she said, I was depressed too once. It wasn't a big deal.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It was
everybody
hard to
missed
hear.
that.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we didn't.
It was hard to hear.
Marginalized it.
Yeah.
She minimized it. Okay.
It was hard. It was hard to hear the video because you could see
Yeah.
the visual,
Yeah,
but no
this-
audio. That audio was delayed.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that because there's another slide with the video. So hopefully it'll go better.
It's
So,
okay. It's okay because you still gave us a lot of information just by the gestures and the eye movements and all that. Thank you.
Okay, but even with all of that, as you saw that, could you see your own listening skills or not so good listening skills in it? I'm thinking you're learning how to be bereavement ministers. How often might we say to somebody who lost a spouse, yeah, I lost my husband too, and this is what I did. Okay. Instead of saying, not about me, it's about you.
No.
Tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And as I looked at the video with the patient, I'm thinking if I were her making all of those gestures, I want out of that room. Okay, because it's not I'm the piece of paper, like you said, I'm the checklist, and she's got to get through this checklist. She's not interested in me or my health, my well-being. Okay. So we have that one.
Then with us too, if in bereavement, if we do the same thing to our people, then it may be a person that has been away from the church for a while. They're not coming back, and we're going to treat them that way.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm just saying.
No, I think it's theirs.
Okay. We ready?
Sister,
Yes.
maybe Holy Innocents would turn their mute their
If
deal.
they can mute their mic.
Yeah, but the other thing is that in the therapy world, one of the hardest things to do is when you ask someone how they feel, is to shut up.
Amen.
And wait until they answer. That's the hardest thing to do because we have a tendency to want to fill in the space.
Right. And we'll be talking about that coming up.
Okay.
Okay. So if I can advance the slide, it's going to let me do it. There we go. Okay.
Whether we're talking to our partners, our friends,
Is that
or
it?
our work colleagues.
Yes. It's on, sister.
Being able to
Okay.
inspire other individuals through your communication will allow you to have a more fruitful and enriching life. Here are my top tips to being a good communicator. Tip 1, use open-ended questions. In order to get a communication going, it's really useful to use open-ended questions. Open-ended questions often start with words such as what, when, how, and why. An example of an open-ended question is,
so what do you like doing in your spare time?
I love cinema, theatre and sports.
It's best to avoid what we call closed questions. An example of a closed question is,
Do you like films?
Yes, I do.
a closed question kills the conversation because it can only be answered with a yes or no answer. Therefore, using these open-ended questions will ensure that the conversation continues to flow Tip 2, active listening. This is a really useful technique as it tells the other person that you've really listened to what they've been saying, and also, more importantly, that you've understood.
The hours are quite long, the work's really repetitive. My boss doesn't appreciate me.
If you've been listening actively, at this point you should now be able to summarise what the individual has just told you.
It sounds like you aren't really satisfied in your job anymore.
Tip 3, the cocoon. Sometimes when people are talking to us, we find it hard to concentrate on what they're saying. It might be that there's lots of background noise or our mind is elsewhere. In order to help you with this, visualise a cocoon around the two of you. This will allow you to focus in on every word that they're saying to you. Tip 4, engage with the other person. If someone is trying to engage you in conversation, your body language is really important.
Tom, I need your advice.
Don't continue with the task that you're already doing. Don't shout the answer over your shoulder.
Tom? Tom, I need your advice.
Sorry.
Instead, what you need to do is stop what you're doing, turn around and face that individual and give them the time they deserve.
Tom, I need your advice.
Of course. What is it?
Good communication style is when you really engage with the other individual. Tip 5, don't make assumptions. Don't jump to conclusions when you're having a conversation with someone. Don't assume you know what they're thinking or feeling about a particular topic.
I assumed you'd be all right with that.
Instead, it is much better to ask them if they're okay with this, if they feel all right about that. You're really then taking into consideration that person's thoughts and beliefs, rather than projecting your own thoughts or feelings on them. Tip 6, avoid antagonistic sentences. An example of an antagonistic sentence is,
You're sitting in my chair.
an antagonistic sentence can be seen as a form of attack, so it is much better and more constructive instead to use sentences such as,
Excuse me, I think you've taken my seat.
this is less confrontational, which will mean your life is full of a lot less conflicts.
Okay. What did you learn there?
Take your time.
I
Take
think all in
your
all,
time.
I think all in all, it all the way around, it's just being present at all times. Just present with the person that you're with and make that person the most important thing around you.
Exactly. So the rest of this is going to kind of recap what you just heard. So we look at active listening. So we want to hear accurately what the other is communicating, what is being said. Not always easy. We want to understand what the other is feeling. And we want to accept what is being felt and committing to be with the other. Okay. It all sounds very easy, but not so much. So that's active listening. Reflective listening involves leaning in or learning in these three areas. So to attend, to follow, and to respond. So what are attending skills? Being present. We make eye contact, our facial expressions, the nod of the head, sometimes leaning forward. Okay. Now, even in our own facial expressions, we have to be aware of, is my face saying that I question what's being said? Is my face saying, I don't agree? What's my face saying as I'm listening? So what are following skills? Following are like door openers. Tell me about that. What was that like for you? I'm wondering if, explain that a little. I'm not sure I heard you right. Can I, is this what you're saying? So you're trying to clarify or get the person to go a little deeper. Open-ended questions would, can you give me some examples of what you mean? What memories are most special? What have you thought of? What is most important to you right now? Can you tell me what that means for you now? See how each of those can take a conversation a little deeper, and it doesn't cost much other than you're listening and being able to kind of create the question without not listening. And as Kathy presented previously, the biggest thing, don't be afraid of the silence. Don't be uncomfortable if someone just shuts down, because maybe they need that time. You know? Most of us are not comfortable with being quiet. We feel then like we need to say something. And just keep in mind, well, that was fun. Come on. God's first language is silence.
Sister,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question regarding silence. If you're speaking to a person who is grieving and they shut down, how long should that silence really last?
Well, who's in control of the conversation?
The interviewer or the friend?
Yep. It lasts as long as they need to let it last.
Okay. Even if it's on like a counseling part of the time? Let's say you're in a counseling mode, how long should that last?
Well, one, are you a therapist?
No.
Then you should not be in a counseling mode.
Okay.
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 You are not a counselor. You are a bereavement minister.
Okay.
Who listens as people will express their concern. If you're in a grief group, if you're facilitating a grief group and person is quiet, then let them be quiet. But you need to keep those boundaries and not get into it, because those of us who are not therapists, are not counselors by profession, can do a potload of damage. And that's why people go to school and get smart in therapy and psychology and all of that stuff. So just be aware of your role.
Okay. Very good.
So as a minister, you let them be quiet, or maybe after a short period of time, you can say, "Can you tell me what's going on? Can you tell me what you're feeling?"
Okay.
But again, it's not off topic. It's like acknowledging the silence and say, "Can you tell me what you're feeling?"
Okay. Thank you.
Stay away from that role as therapist.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sister, I'm sorry, sister, I have a question. My name is Victor Villarreal. In regards to the open-end question, I know you said it doesn't cost much to ask a question, but if you're not prepared to spend the time with that person and let them finish answering that open-end question, they're gonna see that your concern wasn't as there as much as they thought in opening up to you. I mean, could that possibly then shut them down completely? So do you have to be prepared to spend the time to have them finish their?
Yes.
Definitely.
You do.
Yes.
But you're also, you can also say to them, because remember last week, we were talking about children in grief, and if children choose you to talk to, you don't send them to somebody else. The same with what happened with adults that are grieving. If they feel that they have a connection with you, then they're going to pick you to talk to. The thing is if you don't have the time, you need to be upfront and say, right now I can, because of my busy calendar this morning, I can give you maybe 5 minutes. It sounds like you need to have a little more time than that. Can we set up an appointment? Can we set up a time to meet? Okay. So that allows that person to know that I am important to you, that you will create time for me. Okay. You can never be prepared with open-ended questions. You can have them in the back of your mind because, those examples. And then as you get better at listening and get better at developing those open-ended questions, you will find your own, depending on what the person is saying. Does that make sense, Victor?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Sister?
Yes.
I have a question. During our bereavement meeting, sometimes one person will tend to monopolize the conversation. What is a good way to, without, how do you call this, blocking them and making them feel bad? How do you tell them that we have to go ahead and move on and discuss, do the discussion?
There could be, when we get to the bereavement groups, we'll talk about that. But for now, it's, you probably a couple of options. You can say to the person, it sounds like you've got a lot going on. And perhaps we can have some time after the meeting for you to share.
Oh, that's a good one.
But we do need to let others talk. If your bereavement group has a co-facilitator, you can invite that person to leave the group with the co-facilitator to talk. Okay, and have that one-on-one sharing. If the person is dominating because they are uncomfortable either with the topic or that's just who they are, then maybe after the meeting, it would be good to say, we're noticing this about you. Can you tell us a little bit of what's going on with that? And are you uncomfortable with having other people share their grief?
Okay. Those are good suggestions, sister. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Somebody on the phone and I can't hear you. Okay. So, responding skills. Responding is about paraphrasing. So you repeat the core content of what the speaker is saying. Okay. You reflect back what the person has thought or spoken about, but you use your own words. So, an example. It's the strangest thing. People are so unfriendly to me since my husband died, even my best friends. Responding would be, it sounds as though it upsets you when people seem to avoid you since your husband's death. Okay, not quite the speaker's words, but it reflects the core of what the speaker was saying. So you reflect feelings. You want to mirror the feelings that the speaker has spoken about, but not all feelings are clearly expressed. So you might notice that as a person is speaking, what they're saying may not reflect what you see in their body language. So you can ask about that. I see that you're, that you're speaking about this, but your eyes are filled with tears. Can you tell me what's going on with that? An example, I feel numb, frustrated, and can't focus. I wonder when this will end. Your response can be, it seems this is a very confusing time for you. So you don't need to name all those feelings, but that can be confusing. So to reflect somebody's emotions is that you mirror both what is felt, what is expressed, and the content to which they are related. You feel because. So I feel so sad and depressed. Now my children are not speaking to one another. And your response could be, sounds as though it disturbs you greatly that your children are not getting along. So to summarize, you can summarize the conversation or the thought. You can summarize by pulling together and rephrasing larger segments of the speaker's conversation. So what does that look? I just lost, well, hold on. Press the wrong thing. Got to catch up with myself. I'm using the iPad to be a slide ahead of you and my fingers touch something that I didn't want it to. Okay. So the speaker says, I'm concerned about my finances now. The bills keep piling up. I'm not used to doing all of this. So the response could be, I sense that you will need help with your financial matters. Or you might say, it must be an awesome task to try to get things in order. Okay, you see how all of those just allow for that conversation maybe to go a little bit deeper? It's not just hearing that this person is struggling with finances, okay? At the tip of your ear, you may hear that, but it's taking the tip of your ear a little deeper so that you can respond. So other reflective responses could be, so you're feeling sad. You're feeling angry. I get the feeling that this is hard for you. Or what I seem to be hearing is, I get the sense that, it seems as though, or am I right in thinking? Okay. Questions, thoughts, reactions?
Sister?
Yes.
It's B again. it seems like this part of the lesson, it leaves out the leader or the facilitator from actually using their own experience to tell that grieving person,
We can't.
well, yes, I know how you're going through.
No, we
Maybe you
don't.
should try this. And so we
No.
don't do that.
We don't
can't.
know.
No, as a facilitator, it's not your job to tell your story.
Oh,
Yes, I know that. But when do you use your experience, or when do you let the people that are in that same room listening to that person speak use their experience? Is it they that use it, not the facilitator?
It's not, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. It's not an, okay, I hope it's all done. As a facilitator, as a grief facilitator, it's important for you to have people tell their story.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
If you find you are needing to tell your story, perhaps your own grief isn't complete. Now, we're never done with grief. We're never done with grief.
oh, okay.
And your grief is not the same as theirs. So you may have lost your husband, and let's say he and I don't know this, but he may have been responsible for the finances. And I take that because that was our last slide. And you come across somebody in your group is struggling with the same thing. Now, you may hear that and then may say, well, this is what worked for me. Now, it may be appropriate and it may not, because you need to find out who she has asked, who's involved in her life, who's, who might be the one who can help her with that, because the solution for her is not going to be the same as yours. Okay, so you have to be careful. All right, and then when we talk about the bereavement group and facilitating, perhaps some of that, you can ask that question again and see if there's been some clarity. Okay, so what we want to do in redemptive listening is we want to acknowledge that the Spirit of God is at work in each of us. So when I'm training chaplains, I'm asking them, I got distracted by a text. Okay, I don't know when Jose is texting me, so my bad. When I'm training chaplains, I ask them, when they enter a patient room, who are they in the room? Who are they? So even as ministers, if we can ask ourselves, who are we when we are ministering to people who are in grief, that kind of sets up a mindset of, it's not about me. So when I hear chaplains, it's like, how are you the God presence in that room? Because that's who we are. That's what we're reflecting. You as bereavement ministers, how are you the God presence? It's not to say, I'm Jesus, I'm the Savior, or anything like that. But how am I reflecting God? Okay, so we want to acknowledge that the Spirit of God is at work in each of us. We can't fix it and make it better. The only thing we can do is be that God presence. And we witness how God works in each of us, which is a gift. Okay, it's a gift to see how God is bringing healing into somebody's life. And we enter understanding that God desires the fullness of creation in each of us. And that we are commissioned, we are called by Christ.
That's right.
To be Christ-like and offering our own life so that new life can be experienced by another. By being that listening presence, we are commissioned to be that listening presence so somebody can have new life within them. Begin that healing process. That's redemptive listening. It's not like we need to put on a different set of ears or a different way of being. We can only bring our whole self. We can bring our healed self if we've gotten to that part. And if we haven't gotten to that part, that's okay, because that's what we're bringing into the room. God, what's that saying? God's not done with me yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we bring the unfinished God gift to people who come to us for healing. We're not done, they're not done. But we don't forget that each person who comes is a creation of God. You agree?
That's true.
Of course it's true, I said it. Okay. So to be an effective communicator, it's stressful. It's not easy. It requires each of us to have the ability to listen to the other person when he or she has a problem. And the listening process focuses entirely, don't forget that word, entirely on the other person, and puts the listener in an attentive role. And this is called active and reflective listening. And it involves the don'ts. Okay? So we don't get off subject. If we're tired, we don't have time, we want to rush things along. God, we've been at this for 40 minutes. Okay, I'm done. It's time to move on. All right. Or even it's been 10 minutes and they're talking about the same thing. And that's one thing with grief is, you're going to hear the same story over and over and over and over and over to the point where you feel like you can tell the story. So we may want to change the subject, or we could find our minds wandering. We do not bombard with questions unless it's that piece that allows for further discussion. Okay. We do not judge what is being said. We don't do in our head, well, it could be in your head, well, this is the way I did it and I should tell her or him. This is what worked for me. Or, that's just really stupid. I don't understand. I mean, we do this in our heads. We do not give advice because they're not asking for it. And secondly, how do we know it will work for them? We don't put the other on the defensive and ask why. So hearing accurately, what we want to be about is hearing accurately what the other is saying. And we might need, again, to dig deeper so that we can find out if we're listening accurately. Do I hear it correctly? We want to understand what the other is feeling, accept the other's feelings, and be committed to be with one another. Okay. So as you do this, you may find out that you get tired because it does take a lot of energy. Listening is not easy. And the homework that you're going to have this week, most of you will not do. Okay, so just keep that in mind because I'm not going to tell you your homework yet. Okay, so we want to be able to be as attentive and be as present to the person who comes to us or is in our grief group to help understand the feelings. And like I said last week, There may be people who, because of how they grew up, may not even be able to recognize the feeling that they feel. So you may say to somebody in the group, you know, I'm noticing that maybe you could be angry. Maybe their face has changed, and you interpret that facial gesture or their body language as angry. Or you may notice that someone has pushed their chair away from the table and crossed their arms and legs, and that's a visual of closure. It's like they've shut down. They're no longer going to participate. So you may say to them, hey, Joe, it looks like maybe something has caused something within you that you don't want to be part of the group right now. Do you want to talk about it, or do you just need some time for yourself? So again, you want to be able to acknowledge what is happening and try and have people talk about what's going on. Okay, so pull out your handout. What is listening? This is always the hard part. Okay, now. Okay, I think can you see my screen? Am I doing this right?
Yes.
Okay, whew, I learned something from last week. So when we look at what is listening, again, we teach our children to talk, but how do we teach them to listen? How do we teach each other to listen? It's invaluable. So we know that God works through the attitude and activity of the listener. And it's we are then characterized by our state of mind and our heart. So if you had to take a little inventory on what brings you to this ministry, and I ask you why, what would you write? What would you write? Your state of mind and your state of heart. You don't need to do that now, just a question. It's about hoping to continue to bring the presence of the Holy Spirit into the room. That we have the discipline of the poverty of spirit of the listener. And we have the belief that the speaker has the keys to self-understanding. Okay, so it's not about us wanting to bring, well, it is about wanting us to bring healing into somebody's life, but it's really God that heals. So we can be the instrument, understanding that the person we listen to has what they need to bring healing into their life, to open themselves to God's healing. So your activity is that you bring your full attention to the speaker. Again, if you find yourself distracted, pull yourself back in, because if you're finding yourself distracted, how long has the speaker noticed you've been distracted? You respond to the speaker with all of those sets of listening skills. You reflect back the essence or the kernel of what is being said. It's kind of like putting a camera on the speaker. They've got it all. And you roll back your own carpet. So the practical aspects in making contact, the speaker expresses a need to speak. And you agree or you disagree to recognize your limitations. So as Victor spoke about earlier, there may be a time limit. So the best thing for you to do then is, if someone comes to you, is say, you know, I don't have time right now. I mean, I can give you like 5 or 10 minutes, but it sounds like you really need a good chunk of time. So can we set up a time? So be intentional about that. And it's okay to set boundaries. Like I said, the speaker unfolds their story. They are the expert, so that you learn. You use you messages so that you can enter into their world. You seem to be saying. What are you saying? I hear you say. You use I messages. You pull the spotlight away from the speaker and their world. I think that should say put the spotlight. No, you pull it away. Okay. You put the spotlight on the listener, and don't be the one upping the speaker where, you know, it worked for me this way, or I did it this way. Or what are you talking about? That can't be the way. Advice giving interferes with listening. Because if you offer advice, you speak of your own experience, which can minimize the experience of the person who's speaking. So listening is the best response for giving advice. Yes, but usually means that the listener doesn't want the advice. When you say yes, but, okay? You respond to their request for input with, what do you think? So if they ask you, well, how did you do it? Because you seem like you just seem like you've got it together. You put it back on them. Tell me what you think. Tell me what's going on that you might want to know that. Okay. And to believe that they have all that they need. So there is a questing versus questioning. Questing says that I want to seek and find with you. So you're the one about going questing. Use open-ended questions. Give more than a yes or no response, and more than mere encouragement. You enter in at a natural break or pause. So if you want to give a response of what you've been listening, you wait for what appears to be a natural break. Your job is to listen. You can take risks. You can put something out there. And the listener, if you've had that good connection, will tell you whether you were right or not. The speaker's job is to be understood, so you allow them the opportunity to clarify. Listening is an active role, and you give back what you've heard. It lets the other know that they have been heard. Okay, it's kind of it's on paper, everything that was on the PowerPoint. Questions, thoughts?
Sister,
Yes.
the one where there was a point where you said to make set boundaries, you know,
Yes.
and let the speaker know that, you know, you only have a certain period of time. Isn't that off-putting? Wouldn't that be off-putting to some people? Kind of insulting, saying, you know, here I am, I'm grieving and you don't have time for me.
But at the same time, it's allowing them to know that you care. So, you know, I mean, we all kind of fall into that. I need to talk to somebody now. Okay. But you don't have the time. And depending on how you say to them, you know, right now is not a good time, can allow them to know that they are important to you. So you can say to them, I can see that you're upset. I can see that you really want to talk. But for me to give you my full attention, for me to allow you to speak and bring healing into your life, I need to give you the time that you need. And I can't do that right now. I've been at, you know, whatever it may be. Can we meet later today? Can we meet in an hour? Can we meet? So you're not giving them, oh, I can't meet with you until next week. Okay. But
I think too, excuse me, I think too, your facial expression would also reflect your sincerity to the speaker.
yes.
And your body language as well.
Yes. So, you know, one good, perhaps one good thought of that would be, what would I want done for me? If I had to do that with someone, how might I want those words said to me, so that you can create the words that you might want to say to somebody else.
All right, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Sister, I wanted to mention about, you know, sharing our own stories and stuff, or giving advice because of our own experience. From a therapist point of view, we're taught not to do that, because then we are basically letting them live our life and not their own life.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Good point. Veronica, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just have for clarification, you mentioned risky. Well, can you give examples of like what that means? Like
so you're asking for an example of risk taking?
Yes, it was on the PowerPoint on one of the bullet points.
Say again, please.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to, the risk taking on the bullet points. Can you give an example of like what?
A risk that you might want to take is let's say in your grief group, somebody has been sharing the same piece of information about the death of one that they loved. Okay, it's the same thing for, say, 4 weeks. What you might want to do, a risk in that might be, you know, Sally, this seems to be important to you, but it also feels like you're stuck at this point in grief. What would be helpful for you to move a little bit more through the grief? Maybe so. Let's say it's okay. The only an example. I mean, I'm making this up as I go. So let's say that this person is talking about not being able to, they've, been talking like for 4 weeks about cleaning out the drawers and getting rid of stuff. Okay. So, but seems stuck. So you might want to say, it seems important for you to begin to, I don't want to use the word get rid of, but it's the only word coming to me. Get rid of some clothing but it's not easy. Something's holding you back. What would it be like for you to do that, to be able to empty the drawers? What would that be like for you to go through that? Okay, that might be a risk. They may not be ready to talk about it, but you're asking them to go another step in their grieving process, and they may not be ready to do that. Does that make sense, Veronica?
Yes, thank you so much, sister.
Okay. Okay. So if you can pull up another handout there. Okay. So these are things that will get people to shut down. Okay. So you can have put down messages, belittling, ridiculing, disapproving kind of thing. Well, you shouldn't feel that way. You have some really strange ideas. Or you must be kidding. You got to be kidding me. Okay. These are things, these are phrases where people can just say, okay, I'm done talking. Or comparing. When that happened to me, I handled it by. When my husband died, you know, I was so distraught that I da 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 da. The judging, the criticizing, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I can't believe that. You might not be having these problems now if you had. Okay. Think of how often in everyday communication you do this. Somebody's mic is open. Can we mute, please? Okay. We have somebody has their mic open. Can we mute the mic, please? Thank you. So when you think of your everyday communication at work, at home, friends, whatever, how often we use these phrases. We just do it. We're not even aware of it. So we can preach, we can moralize. It's for your own good. There's more fish in the sea. It's a sin if you. God tells us, good Christians we are, we always have to bring God into the conversation, right? Or we divert it. We want to get the attention taken away from us. Oh, that reminds me. Forget it. I'm sure it's difficult. Oh, by the way, let me tell you about. Or we reject it. Let's not talk about it anymore. I have to leave. I can't deal with you right now. Or we challenge people. You shouldn't have done it that way. Or you don't really mean that. We can defend. That person has an excellent reputation. I don't know anyone who doesn't like her. But the doctor is very competent, or the church says. Okay. Raise your hands. How many of you have said any one of those at any one time? Be honest. Okay, be honest. And when you think about it, think of what the other person has done or didn't do. I mean, did they complete their story, or did they just say, okay, we'll talk about something else? But I hope that you can see how these are phrases that disallow a conversation. So if we really believe that the Spirit of God is at work in each of us, then we can trust others and we can trust ourselves. It's trusting the Spirit of God that may not always be so easy. And then we are oriented toward the good. We're good Christians. We want to do what is good, what is right, and what is just. And all of that can be challenged in our culture today. In fact, it is being challenged on many levels, whether it's in culture, whether it's in church, whatever it might be. To live by that Spirit of God is not always the easiest thing to do. So I asked you to bring your Bibles. So the first reading that we're going to have is from Deuteronomy, Old Testament reading. But I do have it on the slide, so you don't need to look it up. Anybody would like to read that for me? Just open your mic and go.
I'll do it.
For this command which I enjoin on you today is not too mysterious and remote for you. It is not up in the sky that you should say, who will go up in the sky and get it for us and tell us of it, that we may carry it out. Nor it is across the sea that you should say, who will go across the sea and get it for us and tell us of it, that we may carry it out. No, it is something very near to you, already in your mouths and in your hearts. You have only to carry it out.
What does that reading say? Anybody?
That it is
Sister.
something that you feel within, that you should feel within yourself.
Yeah, what else?
I think it says that speak and I will give you the words to say.
Uh-huh. And it also says we do it. They don't need to go get it, right? It's not up to them, whoever they are. It's very easy to kind of put the responsibility on somebody else. That we, have to worry about, well, who's going to carry it out? Who's going to do this? They'll do it. Father will do it. Somebody will do it. Okay. But we also know that God's work in each person is totally unique. So our task isn't to make everybody like me, though they would be very happy people if they were, but our task is to honor the God presence in each person. So from Psalm 139, we read that we're all different, physically, emotionally. So in that element, then we experience things different. So the experiences must be expressed to draw out our uniqueness. And listening respects that uniqueness. Listening helps the speaker take ownership of their experience. Connections are made. Okay. So God made us individually with different gifts and talents. We honor and we respect that as we listen and explore for other people how God is working in their lives. When you look up, if someone could look up and read Philippians chapter 2 verses, that should be like from 2 to 11, I believe. Somebody would do that, please.
Sister, what was the chapter and verse again?
Philippians chapter 2 and read from 2 to 11.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay.
Just need to get to the right page. Read from 2 to 11. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was the form of God, did not regard equality with God something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, born in human likeness and found in human form. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, so that the name of Jesus, every knee should bend in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Thank you. So what are you pulling from that reading?
I think for me, it's aside from the salvation aspect of it, that we need to empty ourselves out and be humble and obedient and listen to what God wants us to do and ground our ministry in God and the Holy Spirit and not in ourselves.
Exactly. So in that, we hear that God has desired the fullness of creation for everyone. So we consider our own human potential, and listening can help that potential. And we become co-creators with God in the lives of other folks, so that new life is brought forth. And the deepest kind of poverty is giving up ourselves for another. So we give up our story, our experience, so that we can be fully present to what the other person is saying. So we are called to be Christ-like by offering our own life so that new life can be experienced in another. So it's easy to see in Jesus a change from death to life and from sin to grace. And redemptive listening tries to do the same, bringing someone from darkness to light. And there are many changes along the way, and we are the body of Christ for one another. So the speaker can be in a state of confusion, and your job would be to provide clarity, insight, and meaning. And sometimes the problem is a conflict of values within. Remember last week we talked about how people may question God and be angry, or some of their long-held beliefs about God or about society or whatever, is they're now questioning that because of the death experience or the life experience that's bringing them to this place. So listening moves the individual from being the victim of emotion to using their emotions to become integrated and to see the whole picture. They're allowing themselves to see the goodness of who they are as person, and they're not stuck in that sadness. They're not letting the death of the one they loved kind of control them. So they move from I feel to I see. We help the person gain perspective of his or her own feelings. They can move from self-hate to self-love. Move from feeling alienated to belonging, and moving from their ideal self to the real self. And I say the ideal self because how often do we hear people, they can express, well, I shouldn't feel this way, or I thought I was over this. If I were, if I had greater faith, I would be. And then they can move into the real self. They've accepted who they are for now, in the place that they are and what they are feeling. So they're free to grow and change and understand. Their fear of foolishness to the ability to take risks. And from intimacy craved in our society is achieved. Okay. So somebody pick Matthew 13, 4-9, and somebody else can read 1 Kings 3, 4-12. Who would like to take Matthew 13, 4-9?
I'll take it.
Okay. How about 1 Kings?
I'll find it once.
Is somebody taking that?
This is Jerry.
So who has Matthew 13, 4-9?
Rhonda, I have it.
Okay, if you would read that, please.
Sure. Matthew chapter 13, verses 4-9. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep, and when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear. The disciples approached him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He said to them in reply, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted." I'm sorry, I think I went too far. Sorry, Terry.
No problem. So what is Matthew saying to us in that reading?
I think it's talking about the word of God falls on deaf ears a lot of times and falls on people that listen, that we're all at different stages, and some of us listen and the words grow and some of them don't at different times in our lives.
Okay. It could also talk about our ministry, the seeds that we may plant or not plant, the seeds that grow on good soil or not so good, what's going to grow. Okay. So I think also it says, we can't do it all. We're only here for a short period of time and may be involved in lives of people for a short time. So we can't do it all. And what about 1 Kings 3, 4-12?
I have that. And the king went to give him the sacrifice there, for that was great.
Jerry, you're coming in and out.
I'll lean closer to my computer.
There you go.
Solomon used, that's the great high place, Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give you." And Solomon said, "Thou hast shown great and steadfast love to thy servant David, my father, because he walked before thee in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward thee. And thou hast kept for him this great and steadfast love, and hast given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king in the place of David my father. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, whom thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give thy servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern thy people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this thy great people? It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this, and God said to him, because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Solomon, strong man of faith, what do you hear in that reading? How did Solomon approach God How did Solomon approach the Lord?
It seems, sister, that, excuse me, that Solomon, he said he's a young child, but yet he had tremendous wisdom. It would have been so easy and maybe more human or very human for him to ask for something that people seem to value, which is more material things like wealth, being famous, powerful, and so forth. But he asked for something most important, and I believe close to God's heart, which is, how can I best serve you, Lord, in serving your people? Please give me discernment and wisdom so I can be fair and just, and a listening ear, which is, it kind of speaks to us in our ministry here, is God wants to work through us in a similar manner. Kind of what's been talked about this morning.
Exactly. How do we approach God asking to be a good servant? How do we approach God grateful for all the gifts that God has given us? And how humble. I see humility in this prayer that Solomon prayed before God, acknowledging that even though he's going to be king, the people, there's a massive amount of numbers of peoples, and so how can he be a just king with all of that? So in your own prayer, how is it? How do you bring yourself in humility and gratitude, thanksgiving, and in ministry? How do you present yourself to God? That's for you all to answer. Okay, but Jean is right in that, God has chosen us to be in this ministry. And how willing are we to be that God presence? How willing are we to be that dependent on God to do the ministry God has called us to be? So if we were in person, we would practice, but we can't do that. I know Jose Luis would be able to put us into rooms, but if we were, the difficulty of that is you would not be able to see body language. And so it kind of defeats the purpose of doing a practice listening skills when we can't see everything that goes on in listening. However, your homework is going to be practice. You're not gonna, if we were in person, we would have do this in triads. We would have a speaker, a listener, and an observer. The observer would be the one who would kind of evaluate how both the speaker and the listener were at the task at hand. Did the speaker allow that? Did the listener allow the speaker to go deeper into the conversation, or did they get lost in the conversation, or did the speaker kind of shut down? But everybody would have a turn. So your homework for this week is to practice your listening skills with your spouse. Now they're not gonna know that, they're not gonna be able to evaluate you, but you can practice how well you use reflective listening, empathy. Did you offer advice when maybe advice wasn't there? As a listener, did you were you able to observe body language? What did that tell you? Did that give you different insight into what was being said? Okay, so that's your homework. And I will ask how it went. Not that I need to have a play-by-play recap of everything that took place, but just to kind of get a insight into how well you feel you listened. If you were able to discover areas where you need to grow and spend more time pondering about, okay, how can I do this better? How could I have said that better? How could I have been more present in the situation? Make sense? You good? Okay, that's your homework because we can't practice. And in that, your practice. So for the week, this would be the stuff that you will be wanting to practice. The use
Sister?
of silence. Yes.
This is Irma, or I'm Crystal on the screen, but my internet went down, and so I missed all what the homework was. Do you mind repeating it?
Your homework is to practice listening, because we can't practice because we're not in person. We're doing this virtually. If we were in person, we would have some time to practice listening.
Okay.
To practice, there you would be in triads, and since we can't do that, that's gonna be your homework, and it would have been your homework if we were in person. But so what you will be doing in your homework is you're going to be looking at your use of attending skills.
Okay. Okay. Now
the
I'm
door openers, the open-ended questions, the use of silence. If you paraphrase, if you reflect back, summarizing your eye contact, body posture, all of the nonverbals that people express when they're speaking. Okay, that's your task.
Okay, thank you.
So Henry Nouwen, a great spiritual writer, has said that when we honestly ask ourselves which persons in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solution, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. Okay, that's what we're about. And I believe they're in your bibliography, but two books that I found really helpful for me. One is, and they're small. I think, can you see? Where's my, okay. See if I can get this so you can see it. Anyway, not so much. One is called The Art of Listening in a Healing Way by James Miller. These should be in your bibliography that you had last week. And the other one is The Art of Being a Healing Presence, a guide for those in caring relationships. They're published by an organization called Willow Green. Both of them, they're only like 80 pages long, but they've got a potload of information that's very helpful. So here's confidentiality. We all know it, but you know, it's always that phrase that says, you know, what stays in Vegas, you know, what's happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the room stays in the room. So anything you may hear is not to be repeated. Any stories told, anything like that. So, you know, one of the things that when you do parish work, there are people who can come to you and say, well, I know Sam. I know Sam. What's going on with Sam? I know he's talking to you. What's going on with Sam? Well, you can't say anything. Okay, because folks come to you in confidence. Where you may need to not abide by confidentiality is if the person has expressed any kind of intent to harm themselves. At that point, you need to say something. You either need to take it to the pastor and find out what steps you need to take. So self-harm is the only time that you would need to break any kind of confidentiality. Okay. So it looks like we're going to be able to end early. Way. So next week, bring your Bible. Okay. And bring your obvious success stories, because I know that you will practice listening and you will do ever so well at it. And just review the handouts. Next week, we're going to be talking about creating your grief support groups and your bereavement team. They're two different things. So that's going to be a little intense as we look at those. So bring your Bible, and we will end with this song. And it's about 50 countries that were affected by COVID, and it's their song of Amazing Grace. But I think, COVID's on the rise again, so it's not going to go away. We know that. But, when we think of the war in the Ukraine, when we think of other places in our world that are affected by violence, people who are grieving death by COVID, death by war, death by hunger, I think that this is a good song to listen to. Let me see if I can do this right. Under more. Share sound. Okay, we got it. All right. You ready?
Yes.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. 我最意的赦免。
Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo.
Perdutor salvo soy. Triste
So much has changed in our world lately.
疫情中，这么多人失去生命，显明了生命的脆弱与短暂。
Pero la asombrosa gracia y amor de Jesús es más fuerte que la vida y la muerte.
Wo auch immer du bist, ruf seinen Namen an. Jesus.
Jésus. Isa. Isa Masih. Jesucristo.
Yeshua. Jesus.
Don't wait another day.
Okay, that's all I have for you today. I hope the rest of your day is good and you can have a good week.